Welcome all to our event on privatization. As many of you know, my name is Ted Helms, the Executive Director of the Chamber. This clearly fulfills our mission of promoting trade, investment, and understanding between Brazil and the United States. I would like to thank our sponsors, Santander, Matos Filhos, John Day. I'd like to recognize Ambassador Enio Cordeiro of the Consulate. And just final word is that, in a sense, we started working with Matos Filhos and Jones Day about 6 months ago. Let's do an event on privatization. And clearly what we've learned is that, well, you know, the new administration came in, they observed and seen and what needs to be done and get the right people in place, etc. And, well, we've arrived. And so we're very fortunate to have Leonardo Cabral. Thank you so much for being here. I think the event doesn't happen without him.
In terms of growth, yeah, we had some spikes like back 10 years ago, then down amazingly a couple of years ago in 15 and 16. And what we believe that it don't happen again, at least in the short term. We believe that between 2.5% growth is an okay goal for Brazil, and we don't see any spikes like up or down going forward. So we think that 2.5% growth is something that we could expect to Brazil going forward. It is already reflected in the stock market, as you can see, comparing 16 to the levels that we are today. There was a significant growth in the actual value of the companies listed in the Brazilian stock market. As you know, we have like $27 billion exposure to equities, and BNDES is a development bank. So first, our shareholders' equity is 26 billion. 27 billion of equity portfolio seems too much to us. So we need to reduce this exposure. And second, BNDES was there to help these companies to be developed, to help them to invest in good projects. But these projects are done. We delivered. So we no longer need to keep our stake in these companies. So our idea going forward is to first estimate what should be our actual exposure to equities. It's not 27, it should be much, much less than that. And after we define what should be our maximum exposure, then yes, we start to sell in an organized way most of the assets that we currently own. Talking about concessions and PPPs, we have several projects in Brazil, as it has already been mentioned. Oil and gas, we have a huge project coming in the next month or so. Airports, the same. We still have several good airports to be sold in Brazil. But in most of the cases, like those with the green marks here, BNDES is directly involved. So, for example, ports. We still have several port authorities, like landlords in Brazil, that are still owned by the public sector. We believe that we should be able to provide much better services at a lower cost. So our idea is to privatize most of the ports owned by the governments in Brazil. We already have like 2 mandates in this, and we intend to have even more. Another really important agenda for us is highways. But we privatized in the past, and did continue actually in the last years. We privatized most of our roads in Brazil, but we still have a lot to come. So we just signed a mandate, for example, in BNDES with the Ministry of Infrastructure to privatize 7.2 thousand kilometers of roads in Brazil over the next 2-3 years. In terms of timeline to deliver this privatization program, it's really hard for me to speak about it. It may take a while, as it does. Sometimes it takes 1.5 years, 2 years, but this is not the schedule, the timetable that I work with. I work with a tight timetable. I come from the private sector, and this is the timetable that I'm used to work in the private sector, and we're trying to implement the same timetable, as much as possible, at least, that we have with the private sector to the public sector. Of course, we have some externalities that may impact the schedules, the timetables of the program, but we must be focused. Even when an externality comes, we must be ready to work against them and keep the timetable that we intend to execute.
Privatizations typically face many challenges, and certainly they face them in Brazil, political, social, and legal. Can you please discuss and highlight what you see as the main challenges facing this program in Brazil?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you all for being here. I think that I agree that we have many challenges. I think that basically we could summarize them in twofold. I think that one of them is the size of the privatization program. There's a lot to be done, and I mean it takes a lot of effort. And I think that the other one we could, in a nutshell, summarize as predictability. So how will we be able to offer predictability, legal certainty for the long-term investors that will come, both on the privatization per se, I mean the full privatizations, the sale of public companies to the private sector, but also when we're talking about concessions and PPPs. Whenever you do a privatization, mainly when you're talking about existing public companies, there is this risk of judicialization and those, 10, 20 years court disputes relating to whatever has been done, the valuation, the number of what has been done in terms of the value of the companies, the model that was used. And I think that a lot has been done to avoid that. We do have this modeling that BNDES is doing, and I think that PPI started doing that, and then now BNDES, who is in charge, will continue to do that. That is to make sure that you talk to all of these stakeholders before you put something for sale or you start one of those bid processes. And that is important because that would avoid, for instance, now you will have the prior approval or a sign-off, if you will, from the account control public authorities in Brazil. And that is very important because when you have their sign-off in a process saying that you follow the rules, the valuation, they are not talking about the value, but they would look at the process and they are comfortable. You give a lot of certainty that you reduce the level of discussions and even the room for legal claims and legal battles that could avoid and could cost a lot of money, not only for the private sector investors but also for the government.
The Supreme Court, with a very large majority, eventually decided that, confirming the constitutionality of the sale process of Petrobras assets, and also confirmed that sales of subsidiaries of companies, such as sales of subsidiaries of Petrobras and other state-owned companies, did not need to have a legislative approval, which was one of the questions at stake, and so therefore clarified that only if it's a sale of a new, of an entire company, such as sale of Eletrobras or if Petrobras as a whole were to be privatized, then there would need to be a legislative approval, but clarified that for sales of subsidiaries, such as the sale of TAG, no legislative approval was required as long as it followed the TCU guidelines process and that the rules were, that there were proper auctions with fair competition and the like, which was the case. And so this was a very good precedent for privatizations in Brazil because it clarifies that, except for the sales of the entire companies, you don't need legislative approvals, and that the processes that are in place, even though they are sometimes very burdensome to the extreme, at least they are recognized.
Here, I think we participated in another process that was a very different privatization process in which VR Distribuidora was sold by Petrobras in a equity capital markets transaction in which control was not sold to anyone in particular, but it was dispersed in the equity markets. I think this is also quite unique to see a company being privatized in this way, and I think it has several interesting elements in it. The first one, as I said, no one is actually acquiring control. Control is being dispersed. So if you think about how the public or even employees perceive that transaction, I think with a lot less concern than in the past, because here there's no foreigner coming in and acquiring control of this company, right? So it was a much smoother process, I think, in that sense. Also, a process that invites in several different types of public equity investors into the company that see a situation like this as a trigger for improved governance, improved management practices, and creation of efficiency levels. So this was a transaction of almost 10 billion reais in size that had a book order book of about 4 times this size. So a lot of interest, and we expect that as we move forward, I think this new mechanism is probably something that is going to be increasingly used by the government, not just the federal government, but state governments as well.
Can you tell us what first, how do you put Brazil in the context of your overall global mandate? And really, what are you looking for in terms of an investment, especially, let's say, in the context of privatization?
Sure. First off, thanks for the invitation to speak here. The group that I'm in Blackrock, we're on the private side. We're an energy infrastructure fund, and we have a global mandate. So it's interesting. Of all the countries in the world, Brazil is one over the past few years that's been generating some of the most flow in terms of the opportunity set. Within our focus, a lot of this has been renewables, and you've seen gigawatts and gigawatts of renewables being built, which is great. One of the tenets for Brazil has been to diversify their energy base. That's been predominantly hydro and has driven a lot of volatility in energy prices, which has significantly impacted industry. So, concerted effort underway to diversify. Renewables. There's been a big push there, and I'm really excited about what's going on in natural gas. We've seen in the U.S. the benefits of unlocking natural gas resource in terms of promoting industry, lowering power prices, and I think we're going to see the same in Brazil. Just tremendous associated gas associated with the pre-salt. So, we will be interested in, many of the transportation projects to bring that natural gas to where it can be consumed. Brazil does present some challenges for us in that, a lot of the investment opportunities are local currency denominated, and there's been significant volatility in currency historically. However, in the energy industry, it's nice because much of the revenue streams are often denominated in the U.S. dollars, so that can help. We as a fund, we're a U.S. dollar-based fund, so most of our investments are going to be in U.S. dollar denominated investments. We did just sign a purchase agreement for a large hydro facility in Brazil, where we do take local currency exposure. We'll look at hedging programs and make sure that the contracts are inflation linked. And we've seen historically in Brazil that inflation provides significant mitigation to currency exposure.
Of course, we have more flexibility when selling the assets that BNDES owns directly, because in a way they're similar to TAG, because it's an asset owned by Petrobras and not Petrobras itself. And to sell companies that are owned directly by the government, we need to follow the law. And the law sometimes may not allow us to be like such in a negotiation mood with a potential buyer, but for these types of transactions, what you're doing at BNDES is that we're being close to the potential buyers. Before designing the contract itself, before designing the whole process, we understand the needs of the potential buyers, like have a small roadshow, talk to them, understand what they need to be included in the final contracts, and then deliver or present a contract that would be similar to a contract that is being negotiated.
There is a bill of law being discussed that would allow dollar-denominated agreements in the infrastructure sectors for companies who are exporters. So basically, this could link part of the revenues for certain sectors, not all of them, would be logical. For instance, water and sanitation would be very hard, but for ports and maybe for railways and certainly for PPAs, that would be an alternative. This is being discussed. We would need a legal approval in order to have revenues in dollars, because this is forbidden by Brazilian law now. But this is something that is being discussed, and we expect that this will be approved, maybe before year end or in the next quarter of next year.